The Mafia series is generally a great set of games and rather underrated. The first provided an engaging story full of interesting characters and developments as you start off as a taxi driver who gets a taste of both the dangers of the mob life along with all of its rewards. Most of the story was conveyed through well done cutscenes and great writing. From a gameplay standpoint, it was a mix of driving, shooting, and fistfighting. On the narrative side of things, Mafia 1 has aged like fine wine, whereas the gameplay has some bright spots, but can feel rather clunky to play today. The driving is rather enjoyable as the game mixes in sim-like elements that honestly helps to enhance the atmosphere of the time period. The shooting also has some bright spots with a decent amount of choice in how you tackle some of the encounters, but it could benefit from better balancing as many parts can be really tough, and the fistfights felt sloppy when it initially released, and still feels that way now. But when you have writing, presentation, and a story that good, you can forgive some of the dated gameplay elements.
Hey, Mikey boy, what's going on? Shit, Mike, you can wash your fucking hands once in a while. Now I need a fucking bed.
Hey, I've been working. Working people occasionally get dirty, you know? Besides, I just wiped them off.
With what? The same fucking rag you used to clean the toilet, you filthy fuck?
Put a lid on it. What are you, from the health department, or you want to do some business?
Business, of course. This here's my friend Vito.
Mafia 2 featured an entirely new cast of characters, and while there are some really cool surprises in how it connects back to Mafia 1, the sequel retained the excellent writing from the original. Joe Barbaro deserves much praise as he brings much of the game's laughs, with his hilarious, politically incorrect comments. The narrative centers around Vito and his drive to rise in the ranks of the mob to make it big. We cover a long period of time as we see him work his way up, along with many of the challenges and consequences of his actions. Overall, the story is compelling and great. My only real complaint or comment comes from the open-ended finale, where it feels like some of the game was either not finished or cut out. Mafia 2 had a lot of content and features that were going to be included, but with many of the disagreements between the developer and publisher, it resulted in a much smaller and focused game. I honestly would love to see some of this stuff potentially added back in, with a director's cut of sorts for Mafia 2. Again, the gameplay all revolves around driving, shooting, and punching. The driving is good as each of the classic cars handles very differently. The shooting takes on a more linear, cover-based design. There's some really great set pieces over the course of the story with solid gunplay. While the punching is better than the first game, the absence of more options like melee weapons is an odd choice. Still, Mafia 2 is a stellar game. At this point in time, the Mafia games were generally made by the same team of people. Mafia 3 marked the introduction of a completely new team with Hangar 13, and they followed this up with a remake on Mafia 1. I actually enjoyed both of these games as well, and while they were made by a completely new team, they did retain the quality writing and story that one would expect from this series. Mafia 3 does seem to be a divisive title, and I actually think it works better and should have been marketed as more of a spin-off than a mainline title. In Mafia 1 and 2, you are working in the mob, whereas in Mafia 3, you are systematically trying to take it down piece by piece. I think it is great, but it feels more like a spin-off than a mainline entry. The Mafia 1 remake did a good job of remaining faithful to the original source material, while providing more modern gameplay mechanics, and it seems this would not be their last Mafia title, as a new game has been teased, and I'm really excited for this one. Even before this new Mafia game was discussed, I was hoping and still hoping to see a traditional setting for this game series in Vegas. It is a classic location for this crime world, and I would love to experience this with modern tech. The rumored new Mafia title is again going to be made by Hangar 13, and will be a prequel to the first 3 games, so I do not think we'll be getting that Vegas fantasy in this title, but there's always Mafia 5. My guess for this prequel is that it would be set during the height of the Prohibition era, so there's a lot of potential here. Or maybe they will go back even further. If this new game follows suit with the rest of the series, then it won't be a direct prequel like most prequels are. For example, each new entry in the Mafia series would connect to the last, but in many cases this was done with a nice surprise or set of events. Without getting into any spoilers for Mafia 1 and 2, I hope this Mafia prequel does the same thing where it connects back to Mafia 1 for a surprise event, but is largely a standalone story. The hard part of this is that this prequel was probably never intended to be made, made, when the original Mafia story was written, so the writers need to be consistent with their characters. If we see younger versions of established ones from the original in this prequel, I know that this comment may seem like a no-brainer, but there are many times where new writers will come into a series and write established characters inconsistently, creating a disconnect for legacy fans. The fact that Hangar 13 had Vito return as a main side player in Mafia 3, and he acted in line with how he was developed in 2, it gives me faith that this prequel is hopefully in good hands. I wonder if we will contribute to building up the Salieri family, or maybe we will follow the growth of a particular character, or maybe the game could be Mafia's take on Al Capone and Elliot Ness. Another idea would be to set the game in Sicily. The prospect of this sounds very interesting, as it would mark the first entry in the series not to be set in America, whether it is a direct connection to the first, like creating the Salieri family, or something else entirely. There is a lot to pick from for a story set before Mafia 1.
Tommy, thanks for getting down here so quickly.
Yeah, sure thing, boss. What do you need?
You know, there's a race coming up.
Oh, yeah. Paulie and Sam have some money on the local.
Mikey Dunn.
That's the guy.
He's a good kid, but a bit of a scrapper. Not too smart with his money. A few years ago, Mikey comes to me asking for a loan. He wants to get new tires so he can keep racing junkers out at the quarry. I like fast cars. I figured it'll be a bit of a hobby. Turns out, Mikey's a great investment. The kid can't lose a race if he walks the track.
Regardless, I hope Hangar 13 puts a large focus on its story and characters. Like I said before, the writing in this series is easily some of the best in the gaming medium. Ever since the first game, great story, characters, and writing have all been part of the series' identity. While Mafia 3 had its fair share of issues, from stability problems to some areas of the game's performance, I think it really did a great job at storytelling. Mafia 3 interweaves the events of the main narrative along with interviews from various characters in the future commenting on Lincoln's actions, along with an investigator trying to piece everything together, and Senate hearings that seem to be connected to the main events. The main narrative with Lincoln allows the story to unfold in these sections as a traditional narrative with great direction. The other avenues of narrative, like the interviews, allows the player to see how other characters view Lincoln and his actions. This means that you get to see different interpretations of events in the story. The Senate hearings work much in the same way, along with providing Donovan more time to shine, as he is very loyal to Lincoln and hilarious, and his parts pay off in a very satisfying way at the very end. Now for this new prequel, I would love to see Hangar 13 to take on another unique take on their storytelling. The main narrative in Mafia 3 is a revenge tale, but the excellence comes from how it is told, and that elevates everything about the narrative. Maybe the prequel sees us controlling the same character, but in two different periods of his life. Maybe there will be two main characters that we can switch between, or something completely different. I want a good story, and for Hangar 13 to lean into their creativity when conveying the narrative. When it comes to the gameplay, I hope that certain elements from 3 are used and refined here. One of 3's best aspects in the gameplay department was how you had the freedom to tackle most of the combat situations how you wanted. You could choose to use stealth, engage in loud gunfights, or a mixture of the two. Having levels with this sense of choice could allow for good replay value, and mixing this in with some set-piece moments to bookend large story events would be great as well. Now, some fans have stated how Mafia 3 was a bit bloated in this area, creating a feeling of repetition. While I thoroughly enjoyed the freedom in 3's gameplay, I did not feel the same way as other players. You were doing the same thing for each region of the map, but the locations were varied along with how you could approach them. Having said that, I'm all for a developer trying to refine and hone this area of the game, as I would always prefer a tighter experience over one that feels artificially inflated. Two things I would love to see are a wealth of character customization options in the new game. For example, like a large variety of clothes to wear. People knew how to dress back then, and I want all the options with this. Along with this, I want cars to feature quality customization as well. There is an important thing to note too with this rumor of a new Mafia title. Hayden Blackman is leaving the studio. He was the head guy at the studio, and I've honestly enjoyed his work on this franchise, and his efforts with prior Star Wars titles like The Force Unleashed. He is a really good video game writer, and I'm a bit concerned with him leaving the studio, and Hangar 13 losing employees prior to this. If any of the Mafia 3 and remake writing team are still there, there. That will boost my confidence in this project. I'm not saying that this means this new game will be bad, but it is something to be aware of. Overall, I love the prospect of getting a new Mafia game. I have yet to be disappointed by this series. I hope they can write a compelling story with a good structure to its gameplay, and I hope that 2K gives the developers the time to ensure that it's polished before release. If you're interested in being notified of new videos, please hit the subscribe button and bell. And if you would like to support the channel and get early access to content, please check out my Patreon. All of the links will be at the end of this video and within the description. And thank you very much for watching.